Hello again. Okay, in this video, we are going to start actually making these forms do something. The forms are going to interact with Firebase's authentication service in order to register new users and keep track of existing users. So let's get to work. First thing you're going to need to do before we go back to coding is you're going to need to go to Firebase again. And you're going to need to go to your app. And you're going to need, so right now my app only has hosting, but I also need authentication. I'm going to need authentication, and I'm going to need Firestore, which is database. This is another database, an older version of Firebase's database. Most people use this one now. This is a Firebase. This is a database. But first we're going to do authentication. All right, and we have to press get started. And how are we going to authenticate? Well, there's all these fancy ways to do it, but we're just going to do the good old-fashioned email and password. So edit configuration, enable, and save. Okay. Okay, now let's go back to our code. I've exported authentication from Firebase config.js, and I've imported it here. I want to also make sure it's imported on the home app because that's where the actual sign up is going to take place. All right, it's saying it doesn't know where FB config is. That's because home is in a subfolder. So I need to add an extra dot here to make sure that it goes out of a folder, out of pages, and then it'll be able to find FB config. All right. This auth variable, which we've now imported, we've initialized it in Firebase config, and we've imported it into our app. This auth variable has all sorts of functions that can run on it. And the first function that we're going to use is actually it's an event. It's a listener. It's an event listener that it's going to listen to any time the authentication in our app changes. So to find that, I'm just going to Google directly because I know the name of the listener. It's called on auth state changed. That's just going to take me directly to, I believe, where I want to be. No, it's not right where I want to be. I think I want to be here. Manage users in Firebase. Yeah, this is where I want to be. So it's under web, manage users, because we're basically making a web app, and that which will then be converted into an Android and iOS app. Under manage users, and it's all under authentication, which is part of Firebase. So as soon as we open up our app, the app needs to know what the authentication state is of the current user. So for that, we're going to use this listener or observer, as the documentation calls it. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to put it in the place the app first does its check of authentication, and that is right after it's mounted. So in the app component, I'm going to copy this. And I don't need this Firebase because this Firebase is initialized in Firebase config. So go back and look at Firebase config if you want to understand that better. But I don't need this because this has already happened in Firebase config, and I don't need this because that's also already happened in Firebase config. All I need is this, which is the name I gave to the authentication object in Firebase config. And this basically says that on the auth object, after the app mounted, set up this observer. Start checking if the authentication has changed. And anytime the authentication changed, whether it's in the positive direction, like someone logs in or someone's not logged in, either way, run a function. Okay? And right here, why don't we just write here, we'll write console.log user logged in, so we know that occurred. And how about right here, we write user not logged in. Now, if the user is logged in, it's going to have, it gives us something important. It gives us the credential of the user. It gives us this like big juicy object with all the user's information on it. So I also want to console log that just to see that, just to look at that beast of a object that it's going to return. Let's make sure I didn't break anything. Okay, everything looks good. All right, so this is now checking for authentication as soon as the app component mounts, or as soon as the app loads. Next, I want to actually be able to create a user. I'm going to go back to my documentation. I'm going to go up one here to get started. And I need this. This function is called create users with email and password. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to go to that function that I started writing called handle sign up. I don't need this anymore. I'm going to copy that here. And once again, I don't need this Firebase because I've already handled that in fbconfig, and I just need to refer to it as auth because that's how I exported it out of fbconfig. All right, and let's see, what is this telling me? This is saying that create user with email and password. It expects an email and it expects a password, and then it's going to send that through the auth back to Firebase, and it's going to return whether or not it worked or not. If it worked, it's going to return a user credential, and if it didn't work, it's going to throw me an error. Now then, not only when this information goes through and it creates a user with email and password, remember that not only is this then going to fire when it's done, but also something's going to happen over here because this fires anytime something happens to authentication, and this counts as a state change. So when this runs and it runs successfully, this is going to fire. Okay, let's first make sure that we're giving the right information here. We haven't actually set up a way for handle change to change the state. We've connected handle change down here onto all of our inputs, but we haven't actually made it change the state. So I'm going to just do that now. So anytime we change state in React, we run this function, this dot set state, and we refer to the properties in this state object that we want to change. The most efficient way to handle a change is to take the event that is going to fire. So onChange is an event. OnChange is now connected to this function that we wrote, which means that handle change is going to be handed this event. This onChange event is actually going to be like handled or given or passed to this function. So if I go back up here and I put an E here, that means that that's just going to refer to, I could put anything there. That's just going to refer to the event that is being passed to handle change. So I could check out that event just by logging it, perhaps. Comment this out for a second. Make sure this works. Yep, good. These are all events that are coming in. The onChange event. And what I'm going to need is the target and specifically the value of it. So I don't need to find it there. I just know that it exists. This is actually what I want. The value is the event and the target of the event, which is the input box, and the value, which is what I've entered into the input box. These three together are basically whatever I entered into that whatever I entered into the input box that I'm currently typing. And the ID is just this. Okay, the IDs that are attached to the input. Now what we want to do is I've named these first name, last name, email sign up, password sign up, email sign in, password sign. I've named these the same as the ID that they correspond, the input ID that they correspond with. So password sign in. I've also named it up here, password sign in. So that means that I can just refer to whichever state I'm changing. I can just refer to it as according to the ID. So for that, I'm just gonna, I'd use this syntax. Okay, and then what am I going to set this property of the state to? Well, I'm going to set it to whatever the value is that I typed. What if I just log the state now? Right after. So after I've changed the state, I'm going to try to log the state. Let's see what happens then. Okay, type first name A. Uh-oh. First name still says blank. What if I type another A? Ooh, now it says, now it's recognizing the first A, but not the second A. What's going on here? Third A. Oh, it's recognizing the first two A's, but not the most recent A. What's happening here? Well, what's happening here is that set state is actually an asynchronous function, and it takes a second to finish writing the state and to re-render everything. That takes like a little, like a couple milliseconds, and that means that this doesn't have time to register the fully updated state. You need to pass in a second argument to this .set state, which will just be a function, which is the logging of the state. Let's try that. All right, now it's right up to date. Okay, that's important. It's important to know that this .set state, that you can't just have something immediately referring to the new state, like in the next line. You have to take into account that this set state is asynchronous, and if you want something to run as a callback or after the set or after the set state is completely finished, then you need to insert it as a second argument to set state. All right, I'm gonna do one more thing, which is a little confusing, but it's good practice, and I feel like I have to show it. When I type something here, the state changes. When the state changes, there's a re-render that happens. The re-render happens because this render function fires every single time that the state changes. However, when this render function fires, it fires as if there's an input here without any value. So there's a little bit of a mismatch here. React is showing me an input here, but React is not fully aware that the value of this input is the state, because basically it's copied the state, it's copied the value from here into state, but it hasn't kind of copied it back into input. Now, it's not necessary for me to do this next step, but I want to do it anyway because I want to make sure that React kind of closes the circle and fully sees that the state that it's recording is being used as the being used as the input for this this form, for this part of the form. So the way I do that is I just type value equals this dot state dot first name. And now you see it basically, it doesn't look like anything has changed, but something important has happened here. And the more that you use React, the more that you'll realize that this is important. React now, I've sort of done a complete circle. I've dealt with the change using handle change. Handle change changes the state. The state, the changing of the state reruns the render function. And whatever that state is, whatever that new state is with those new letters that I put in, are inserted as the value for this input. This is important because what if later on in some other app or something, I wanted to like control the value of that by changing the state, some other way, not by typing, but some other way. Like if I go like this, if I type test into first name now, and I click here, you see it knows now that value of that input and this property of state are connected. All right, that was a bit of a tangent, but I felt like I had to say it. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish all of these values. I'll go back and I want to make sure I'm doing things the right way. Oops, I put one in the button. Button doesn't have a value. Okay. And let's see, the value of first name is first name. Again. Cool. All right. So my handle change function is now completely set up. Back to authentication. Authentication is expecting an email and password. So that's easy enough to get now. Let's just say that var email equals this dot state dot email signup. And let's say that password equals this dot state dot password signup. Okay, don't really need this right now. Let's just say something here called, let's just console.log successfully created user. And if there's an error, all right, let's test that out. Okay, successfully created user happened. Awesome. And what else happened? User logged in. That means that this fired over here. And it printed out this ugly object full of all the information related to my authentication credential. Now, if I go back to Firebase and I go to authentication, ta-da, there it is. I've now successfully created a user and authenticated that user in my app, and I can see that user on my backend. Okay, I don't have a sign out button yet. So when it comes time to sign out, for right now, I'm just going to actually delete this. I don't want to do that yet. I first want to make sure that that I can sign in now that I've already signed up. So in order to make the sign in function work, I first need to build it. And in order to build it, I need to go back here to my documentation, sign up new users, and I need this function. sign in existing users, sign in with email and password. It's very similar to the create user with email and password. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it in my handle sign in function. I'm going to get rid of this again as usual. I'm going to get rid of this again as usual. Do a cleanup, Alt-Shift-F. Okay. This same thing, email and password, except for this time, it's email sign in because it's a different property in my state. Password sign in, signs in, signs in, signs in. Let's do successfully. Let's type in here, successfully signed in. This can be the same. Okay, so to test this, because I don't have an easy way to sign out yet of this app, I'm actually just going to copy it. I'm going to open up a private window so this doesn't know whether or not I'm signed in. Okay, and let's see if I can sign in now using this handle sign in. Successfully signed in, user logged in. So this got triggered, and also this on auth state changed also got triggered. Awesome. So now both of these forms work. I'm able to sign up, I'm able to sign in. I'm going to close this now. I'm going to, as you're working, you're going to find that you often have to delete accounts that you make, especially at the beginning, because you might want to test this a few times, especially for what we're going to do in the next video. So for right now, I'm just going to press this, delete account, delete, and that should, let's see if I refresh this now. User not logged in. Cool. So now it no longer thinks I'm logged in because that user doesn't exist anymore. All right. In the next video, we're going to create the page that you go to after you sign up or after you sign in. See you soon.